I got 2 viewers. That's enough to make me happy. Thanks for joining. So let's start on tip number 1. My first tip is avoid buying anything 9 years or older. My reason is because the OEM parts slash, also known as manufacturer parts, become obsolete after this point in time. So 9 years or older, they start becoming obsolete. So if you're picky about how the aesthetics of your camper looks, like the outside trim or the inside trim, any background colors or anything like that, even wood color and texture, it's going to be difficult to get those parts. So if you're okay with generic looking stuff and you're fine with putting hodgepodging some stuff together, or you're okay with things not matching, then go ahead and buy an RV that is 9 or 10 years old, especially if you are a little bit of a DIYer and can attach these things yourself. So keep in mind at that 9 and 10 year mark that technology in RVs easily goes obsolete as well. So anything that's considered a new fancy feature, it goes obsolete pretty quick. Wi-Fi extenders, little touch pads and stuff for your RV, those can sometimes be, the software and the hardware for those can go obsolete, and you'll just be stuck trying to figure out how to get that new piece of equipment to work on your old RV. You won't be stuck, but the technician could be stuck, and it could end up costing you money in the future. If you have an extended service agreement, I don't know if it covers stuff like that, but sometimes they do. Manufacturer warranty, if something's changed in that hardware, it can cover that as well. Moving on to number 2. Towing capacity. Keep in mind that this is if you have a truck available. You need to have the towing capacity of your truck greater than the gross vehicle weight. That's a GVWR. You'll see it on the sticker on the inside of a door or on the outside of the frame. Typically, it's going to be yellow so you can see it. But the gross vehicle weight of your RV needs to be less than your towing capacity of your truck. And the gross vehicle weight is when your RV is fully loaded with all your stuff. That's including full water tank, all your supplies and your food, your clothes, your dishes and utensils, silverware, tools, spare tire, and even your towing hitch adds weight too. It's pretty heavy. So if you're planning on getting a travel trailer or a fifth wheel, make sure that the truck that you are towing with has the appropriate towing capacity. I always aim to have your towing capacity of your truck more than your gross vehicle weight of your fifth wheel or travel trailer. Same thing applies with a motorhome. If you're planning on towing with a motorhome, what you would tow with your motorhome is a tow vehicle that is like a car or a Jeep or even another truck. Be cautious if you're towing something, because a lot of vehicles nowadays cannot be towed with 2 wheels up because of the oil circulator or the transmission fluid circulator. A lot of vehicles nowadays need to be either towed on all 4s or completely just off the ground. So make sure if you're planning on getting a motorhome, make sure that your tow vehicle is able to be towed how it needs to be towed, either on all 4s if it can, or either all 4s on the ground or all 4s off the ground, or even 2 wheels on the ground, because you don't want to ruin your car. Number three on the list here, before you even think about buying an RV or start shopping around for brands and manufacturers and stuff like that, is storage capacity. Keep in mind that storage capacity on an RV is give and take. Same with the interior design of an RV. It's a box with limited space. It's not very modular, but they are having way. RV manufacturers are always coming out with more creative ways to make uh, furniture convertible for multiple purposes. But your storage capacity, if you have, is important to know if you have hobbies and you need specific supplies and what size they are and how much of it you need. I know that there's some RVs that are specific for going off road, four-wheel motor homes that are Class B sized vans. They have upgraded suspension, upgraded tires, better ground clearance, and off the grid camping, like solar panels on top, a generator that runs off the fuel and stuff like that. So if you have a hobby that requires you to go off the grid, make sure that whatever you're buying is capable of doing that and storing everything that you need. The more space, typically the more space that you have open for lounging around, the less space you'll have for storage. So just make sure that you have enough storage for whatever hobbies you're planning on doing, and do not underestimate it, because you typically end up carrying more than you think you will. You can get toy haulers for if you have motorcycles or four-wheelers, big machines that you can carry in the back. Those toy haulers can be a small travel trailer or a large fifth wheel. The door just comes down from the rear of the RV. That rear wall just folds down, turns into a ramp, and you can pull your four-wheeler or your motorcycles into there and strap them down. Yeah, just keep that in mind. I've seen RVs that are specifically built for ice fishing and stuff like that, because that was an interesting question I got on Go RVing on the subreddit. So I checked it out, and yeah, they do have RVs specific for ice fishing. So yeah, if you have hobbies, just Google it. Say, hey, I'm looking RV made for ice fishing. That's all I Googled, and poof, something cool popped up. Number four, the number four feature to consider before you even start looking at manufacturers and brands of campers is how many people you will be sharing the RV with. That includes friends and family. You want to know the minimum and maximum occupancy for your RV. So your bunk beds will have a weight capacity. So if you have large full-grown adults, I would not recommend thinking that you can get away with putting them in a bunk bed. Again, they have multiple use furniture, like the couches can fold out and the tables can turn into beds. But those also have weight capacities. So just keep that in mind when you have an RV full of full-grown adults and no kids. Those convertible beds from the table and the couch may also not be tall enough for full-sized adults. So fold it out, measure it, see if keep in mind who you're going to be camping with, and see if that convertible bed is tall enough for them to sleep in. Number five is going to be fancy features and doodads. I would recommend that you kind of deprioritize this. Yeah, they can be pretty neat and convenient to have, but the more fancy features and doodads you have, the more stuff they can break. It's simple as that. I can't sugarcoat it. Yeah, they're great. inconvenient and nifty, but if they're electronic or motorized, they can break, and they typically cost a little bit of money to fix, that to diagnose and fix. If you are set on having those fancy features and doodads, try and make sure that a majority of them can be used or operated manually. So just for example, if you have an electric awning, make sure that your awning can also be operated manually, because if that motor goes out, you won't really have a good way of putting that back up other than getting a ladder somehow and rolling it back up and zip tying it together in order to get it fixed at a later destination. Another thing that can leave you stranded is slide rooms. I know it's not a common feature anymore, but it's really difficult to find a slide room that can be operated manually in the case of a slide room motor failure. Now, slide rooms can be operated hydraulically or electrically. The electric side uses motors on the inside of corners or through a pulley system with motors for your slide rooms to bring them in. But for the pulley systems, I'm not a huge fan of, just because it takes a lot of fiddling around in order to get those slide rooms evenly pulled in together. The electric motors, you can typically disconnect them and push them in manually, or sometimes I've seen there's a hole in the slide of that slide room, and what you can do is you just crank it closed or open as a backup, which to me was a pretty neat feature. But if your slides are going in a little wonky, you'll want that reassurance that you can bring it in or bring it out manually, because you'll be stranded if you have them stuck out. You can't pull a camper down the road with your slides hanging out. It's not legal. Same goes with your fancy hydraulic auto leveling system. Make sure that there's a way to bring those things up, and they're not intuitive. There's no instruction manual on how to, for each specific RV, there's no instruction manual on how to manually override your hydraulic leveling system if it's stuck in an up or down position. It'd be worse if it was stuck in a down position. Then you'd just be stranded there again. Usually that involves bleeding your hydraulic lines and relieving the pressure so that your jack legs will go, so that you can force your jack legs back up with like something of leverage, like a plank of wood or a pry bar or something. It's a real big pain in the butt. So that's why I always try to get things, as many features as manually operated as possible. You can have landing legs and manually stabilize and level your own camper with just planks of wood or leveling blocks, something like that. You don't need to have a $5,000 system in order to level your camper. But it is important to keep your camper leveled, because that will affect the operation of your refrigerator. The fluids in the back of that refrigerator largely depend on gravity flowing the fluids. The fluids turn to gas as the air compresses it, and then it cools, and your cooling fins on the back, and it recondenses as it cools back down to a liquid and flows into this like Z-shaped pattern, the zigzag pattern, all the way back down to the condenser again. So if your camper is not level, it can affect the efficiency of your refrigerator, and it may even cause it to stop working. Another thing you should consider, number 6. item on the list is what weather conditions are you planning on camping in? If you are planning on using your RV year round, you should check the R rating, which is the insulation rating for cold temperatures. Typically the higher number R rating of your insulation, the better the insulation will keep the cold air out and the temperature regulated inside of your RV. For cold temperatures, you need to make sure that you find an RV that is truly rated for camping in freezing temperatures, and that is not very common. Most RVs will say that they have a polar package or is suitable for 4 seasons camping or something like that. But until you actually dig into the specifications of what that RV actually contains, which is the insulation rating, if the underbelly is heated, if the hot water lines run along the cold water lines inside your RV, where the water lines are located. Sometimes they can be in the subfloor, sometimes they'll be in the underbelly. Obviously, all that plays a factor in whether or not you risk your risk tolerance for your pipes freezing. And we all know that frozen pipes are not a good thing. So if you have a sealed underbelly, make sure that if you're planning to camp in cold temperatures, that there's some sort of heat being forced into your underbelly to keep your pipes from freezing, and there is some sort of temperature regulation in that underbelly or in the subfloor. Now, obviously, the more complex and weatherproof your RV is, the more expensive and complex it will be to repair those water lines. So just keep that in mind. The tougher your RV is built to withstand inclement weather conditions, the more difficult it will be to access those lines to repair. And also, on the flip side of that, if you are planning on camping in extremely hot weather conditions like Arizona or Texas, make sure that you have 2 air conditioners at least, and that will require a 50 amp service because your RV air conditioners typically consume on average on an average day 13 and a half amps, I think it was, and on really hot days they consume 15 amps or more, 15 amps and more. And if a lot of other factors can play into how many amps your air conditioner draws, if your cooling fins are straight, if your cooling fins are dirty, if your AC cover is black or white dissipates heat better. And another thing is the age of your air conditioner. The compressor might have to work harder the older it is. Keep in mind, a lot of air conditioners on RVs are not refillable units. So if you're planning on buying used, you might want to check and see if a local RV repair shop can tap a cooling line inside of your RV air conditioner in order to refill it, because that is a custom job, and RV dealers typically do not refill AC cooling units. What they do is just pick them up, replace it, and throw the old one away. Is it wasteful? Yeah, but it's much less time consuming for RV dealers, and it's less risky too, just because it takes a special skill in order to actually tap into an AC cooling unit and refill the coolant in it. But they recycle those ACs at the scrap yard, so hopefully it's not too terrible for the environment. Again, you'll need If you're planning on camping in super hot temperatures, a better insulation rating keeps your inside temperature regulated better. You want 50 amp service with 2 ACs, and that should keep you pretty good. The hotter it is outside, the hotter your inside is going to be too. Your ACs on a camper can only do so much, but those two factors are gonna be pretty big when it comes to being able to camp in those hot conditions if you don't like being hot. Number 7 on the list. 7. You need to have an idea of where you will be camping most frequently. If I recommend buying locally from a dealership that has a service center, because if you plan on camping in that area, it's nice to have that safety net of saying, hey, I bought my RV here, such and such is wrong with it. I'm your customer. I bought it from you. They typically will give you more priority than Joe Blow off the street who bought their camper third party from somebody, and that person worked on their RV and modified things and worked around some wiring and stuff like that, because they're familiar with the camper that they sold, and they know how to work on it and fix it and repair it, and they're more likely to give you priority if you bought it from them. So if you plan on buying locally, if you plan on buying an RV, I recommend buying locally from a dealership with a service center. Also, after 1 year, the manufacturer warranty wears out. So highly consider purchasing an extended service agreement. That extended service agreement will cover your expensive, if you have them, your expensive features. So if you have an awning motor that goes out, it'll cover replacing that awning motor. If you have a refrigerator go out, it'll cover replacing that refrigerator. Your stove top, your oven, it won't cover roof leaks and stuff like that. So maintenance is always important. It won't cover tire blowouts or suspension failures, but any appliances or electric components to it typically covers. Just the your water heater, your converter, your inverter. Doesn't cover batteries and stuff like that. So if you buy that extended service agreement, it covers a heck of a lot of stuff, but it doesn't cover everything. It's not a bumper to bumper typically. Even if they say it's bumper to bumper, it's not. Get a full booklet of the extended service agreements and read the exclusions section of it. It's super boring and it'll put you to sleep, but it's really important to know what an extended service agreement covers and what it doesn't, because even the manufacturer warranty doesn't cover everything. And after that 1 year, manufacturer warranty typically won't cover anything unless it's a clear defect in what the manufacturer did. That's really hard to prove, so you might as well get the extended service contract to cover your butt. It can save you thousands and thousands of dollars. I used to work on extended service agreements, and I saved customers a lot of money, like $27,000 on one motorhome. So just be aware that those extended service contracts can pay for themselves. Typically, the more expensive your RV is, the more your service contract is going to cost. But it's worth it, in my opinion. Have an idea of where you'll be camping. To further extrapolate from that, you'll need to know if you are going to be dry camping or boondocking, or just camping up or hooking up to city connections like city water and city electricity from an RV park or a state park where you can pull your RV and just hook everything up. If you plan on boondocking or dry camping, you'll probably need a generator or the ability to be self-sufficient. I've seen some people go all out with their solar panels, water tanks on the roof, um, big generators, extra fuel, extra tires in case anything goes wrong. Yeah, make sure that you know where you're going to be camping, if you're going to be dry camping or if you're mostly going to be hooking up to city water, because you're going to want to equip yourself properly for doing that. Number 8 on the list is to be prepared to spend at least $1,000 or more over your budgeted RV price. So whatever RV you're looking at or thinking of looking at, take that price value down at least $1,000 and be prepared to purchase extra stuff on top of your RV. It's something that goes easily overlooked. So for like a travel trailer, typically most people have to buy a ball hitch and they'll want to buy sway control or stabilizer bars for towing. And that's easily $300 to $500, depending on how fancy you want to get with it. For fifth wheels, if you have a truck and it's not an extended bed, you might need a fifth wheel kingpin receiver hitch to be installed in the back of your truck. And those can, if you can get them used, great. I would definitely recommend a used fifth wheel hitch, because they're just solid pieces of metal and they typically don't break, and the technology in them hasn't evolved in quite a while. So there's nothing wrong with buying a used fifth wheel hitch to save a few $100. Definitely recommend it. But again, yeah, those fifth wheel hitches can be fancy. If you have a short bed truck, you might need a slider hitch, and those are kind of costly. And those slider hitches basically make it so that if you're backing up your RV into a spot or just making a sharp turn, it makes it so the front cap of your fifth wheel RV doesn't hit the cab of your truck. I've seen it happen. It's not pretty. So yeah, just budget at least $1,000 extra for on top of whatever you're budgeting to pay for your RV. That's not even including the extended service agreement. So maybe even $2,000, maybe $1,000 to $2,000, let's say. Another thing that a lot of people don't realize can cost a little extra is wiring up a brake controller. And sometimes it's plug and play. It's really easy. And sometimes it's difficult. A difficult job is called a hardwire job, and those can take several hours and cost quite a few $100. So bring your truck into a dealership or a shop, an RV shop that knows what they're talking about, and ask them, hey, if I bought this camper with this truck, am I going to need to hardwire a brake controller? And if they say yes, be prepared to spend a few $100, like $300 to $500, easy. Number 9 on the list is kind of a strange one, but still vital. And number 9 is determine if you need an RV at all. You can do that if you plan out where you would like to go. See if they have hotels, Airbnbs, or a state park cabin in that location. Just remember that RVs are depreciating assets that require monthly payments, even when they're in storage and you're not using them. So you have to ask yourself and calculate, will the monthly cost be financially advantageous for you? And just keep in mind that RV campsites typically range from $30 to $60 per night, but I've seen them go to $100 or more. That's like $1,200 for a month if you plan on camping in that campground for a month, long term. But yeah, just make sure that you're actually going to use your RV, because there's nothing worse than buying a nice toy and not being able to use it, not having the time to use it. I've seen it happen way too many times. And on top of that, make sure that you have a place to store it. Storage costs money too. So you have your storage costs, you'll have your monthly payments, you'll have your camping space fees, you have your gas. Just keep in mind, all that adds up when you own an RV. And that's not even calculating in yearly maintenance costs. On average, I would say RV maintenance costs around $500 to $1,000, depending on how fancy your RV is. So add that into your budget too. Every year, just assume that you'll spend $500 to $1,000 on maintenance. Obviously, the more basic your RV is, the less fancy features it has, and the more manual operational equipment that it has, the less expensive it'll be to maintain. Again, and do that stuff. If you have a camper and you're doing that stuff, make sure to schedule a time in the winter to have that stuff worked on and paid for by manufacturer warranty or an extended service agreement. So that way, when it's done, you know that it's ready to take out camping for when the weather starts getting nice. Item number 10 on the list, and the final item I have, is consider renting an RV. Dealers typically rent Class C motorhomes between $750 to $2,000, plus a safety deposit, depending on the time frame you're looking to rent. So I would say they typically range from 3 days to a full week. Look for that type of range. The advantage to renting from a RV retailer is to practice your turning radius, getting used to the turning radius of a motorhome. Now, a lot of people are scared to drive a motorhome because it's 32 feet long, and it does have a little bit of a learning curve when it comes to getting used to how wide it actually turns. So definitely try to rent an RV for a motorhome if you're planning on getting one from a dealership, and risk your safety deposit on that instead of buying a new motorhome and then wrecking it and costing you thousands of dollars to get it repaired. Typically, those safety deposits don't cover the full cost of repairs if they're like $500. So you're walking away with the peace of mind that unfortunately that risk is on the dealership, but you damage their property instead of yours. It's kind of you're going to lose that safety deposit, and obviously if you wreck it, yeah, you're not going to get it back, but you can take comfort in knowing that it wasn't your RV and you didn't lose thousands of dollars fixing your camper up yourself. And it'll be an expensive lesson learned, but it's a lot less expensive than wrecking your own. Another way you can rent RVs is by checking out rvshare.com. It's basically like Airbnb, but for campers and RVs. Basically, I've seen prices a lot. This is where you can get travel trailers and stuff. You can rent travel trailers, fifth wheels, and motorhomes here, all for a pretty reasonable price. I don't know what kind of attachments for liability are on there because I've never used the service myself. I'm going to do some further research and see what the customers are liable for, the renters are liable for, but it seems like a pretty great platform that's picking up steam as far as how many people are using it to rent out their RV. Anyway, that is my full list. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to add them to the live video, and I can answer them in the comments or add them in another video. Thanks so much for watching and have a great day. Oh, also, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.